and welcome back to the NWA 1983 project. I'm your host, Lex G, and along with me, as always, is Matt Riley. Matt, how you doing?
Still awake.
Still awake. Well, get excited. Get your Red Bull out. Get your Surge. They brought that back, by the way, folks. It's got it from the 7-Eleven. Tonight's episode is going to feature our big events, our pay-per-view, so to speak, our network special, perhaps, if you want to call it, our closed circuit events. And this will be live from Atlanta, Georgia, from the Omni. Now, the Omni, for those of you who don't know, is one of the wrestling cathedrals. Wrestling holy ground, perhaps. It's held in the same regard as Madison Square Garden, Boston Garden, the Silver Dome, or the Superdome, the Superdome as well. It's one of these venues that is super important in wrestling history, and it's one of the things that should be shared and remembered because it's that important. A lot of big matches happen there, lots of great events. The crowds were there were always hot, jam-packed, turned thousands of people away. They're hanging from the rafters, the whole nine. So it's only natural during this time period that we have a big show at the Omni. The main event this evening is Ric Flair versus Mad Dog Buzz Sawyer. Interesting facts about Buzz Sawyer. He's someone that you don't really hear about today very often. And I know he passed away in 1992, so a lot of his stuff, a lot of these wrestlers get, they continue their popularity by going to conventions, doing shoot interviews and what have you, but we don't get to hear from Buzz. And I thought he was a unique talent, something ripe for the times. Again, an ugly heel, that he could wrestle a little bit too, but he was a madman in the ring. He's someone that in the Attitude Era, if he was still alive, he could have been a big deal.
Yeah.
Especially if he went down to ECW or he went down to, even having matches in WCW. He was in WCW for a time in the early 90s, feuding with Sting and Ric Flair, but as part of Gary Hart's J-Tex Corporation, which is interesting. And then he was in the Kevin Sullivan's stable called the Slaughterhouse. So, he's one of those guys. And then there's tons of them in the 80s. Tons of these guys in the 80s that, given the right opportunity, would have made a decent, heavyweight champion in the world, NWA champion. He passed away at 32, which is real young. So
yeah, what happened to him? I forget. Was it his heart?
He died from heart failure due to a drug overdose. But
That'll do it. So a little of both.
So heart failure from a drug overdose, apparently. But fellow wrestler Billy Jack Haynes contends that his death was a hit because they were both part of a part-time drug smuggling ring in the Pacific Northwest. So there you go.
Billy Jack Haynes.
He's crazy.
Solid source.
Solid source. It happened to Dino Bravo, so.
That's true.
That is true, so.
He's moving those ciggies.
Yeah, for real. It's weird. Anyway, untaxed cigarettes, people get murdered. Unbelievable. Buzz Sawyer was known for his epic feud with Tommy Rich, which, their greatest match was billed at the last Battle of Atlanta. And it was the first appearance of the enclosed cage, very similar to the Hell in a Cell. And it's actually the inspiration for Hell in a Cell.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Buzz Sawyer left us probably too soon, and I wish he got a bigger run. He was in the WWF for like 3 minutes. But,
yeah.
A lot of guys were in and out of WWF, especially early on. But, wish he stuck around a little bit longer. So, definitely, hurt the wrestling business, I think, losing such a great talent. So Buzz Sawyer, if you can hear this, wherever you are, I thought you were pretty cool. So one of the topics that we want to talk about, and this recently came up, and I asked a question, and this might be a controversial question, but, I'll ask it anyway. We'll see where we go from there. But John Cena, who is the most popular wrestler of the day, not only that can be debated, folks, it's a fact, the most popular wrestler of the day, starting to cross over into mainstream, whether it be movies, TV shows, what have you. Non-wrestling fans are starting to know who he is. And I think one of the things that's appealing for him is the fact that he seems to be a great role model. Now, when you take someone like John Cena and compare him to the role model of my youth, Hulk Hogan, is it fair to say that John Cena is a better role model than Hulk Hogan?
Yes.
The question becomes why?
Well, I think Hogan became a role model because of the money and the attention it put on him. Whereas I think Cena, no doubt that the wrestling pays well, etc., but I think he generally enjoys it. And you don't hear, at least not that I've heard, the backstage politics the way they do from Hogan. I think, John Cena's made it a point in his life to do the Make-A-Wish Foundation, over and over and over again. Unless he's a fetish for dying kids, I think it's legit.
That's the big difference. Now, there hasn't been a whole lot of people to come out and speak against John Cena. There's been a few, not a whole lot. But if you look at the long laundry list of people who've come out against Hogan, it's in the hundreds, I would assume.
Yes.
It would be backstage antics, not putting guys over, that kind of stuff. But as a man, as a person, I grew up a big Hulk Hogan fan. So I'm sort of a Hulk Hogan apologist.
Okay.
But even I can see that, he did genuinely, enjoy helping out kids in the 80s. And he did do a lot of those Make-A-Wish foundations too. Make-A-Wish wasn't as big as it is today, obviously. Always doing something for charity, spending time with kids, visiting our troops in other countries, much like John Cena does today. So I get the comparison is very similar, where I can't compare Hulk Hogan as a role model versus a Steve Austin or a Rock, because The Rock may have done more of that stuff, but I never really hear about Steve Austin's charitable work. I mean, he may or may not have done it. I don't know. Maybe he doesn't talk about it. But, from someone who's on the outside looking in, I didn't see a whole bunch of that. But we do hear these stories about Hulk Hogan, about alleged, drug use. Would it be, cocaine? Would it be marijuana? Well, which, to each their own, I guess. But in terms of a role model, you don't hear those stories about John Cena. And those stories were coming out at the time, too, in the 80s. This is not something that came out 10, 15 years later. These were stuff that came out during that time. That's why Bruno has such a big issue with Hogan being the face of, professional wrestling. Bruno came out real early saying that Hulk Hogan was not a role model. And it wasn't even about the wrestling aspect of it. But, Bruno always thought he was a bad guy.
Well, I think you also see, too, now, like with Hogan and the whole lawsuit against Gawker and the video and just the suspect, plus the family, like Hogan knows best. You see the contract he had where he obviously put himself above everybody else. He wasn't a team player, so to speak. And where Cena's actually done some things to help promote other guys. I think he's learned a lot, like maybe not early career, but I think as for kids it goes, he's I hate his ring attire. Always will hate his ring attire. I'm sorry, the jorts.
I used to wear those back in the day, too, so I can't really complain. I have Boss ones that were hunter green. I also had Boss ones that were purple.
Hey, you know what, though? You don't wear them now, right? Like, I had a mullet when I was a kid. Like a badass mullet.
I've thought about it, to be honest. These go down to my ankles, too, which is ridiculous.
Well, you be careful. I was at work. I was talking about someone who I realized someone was a juggalo. And one of the guys at work was like, I'm a juggalo. And I just was like, oh.
The NWA project loves the Juggalos, by the way. I just want to put that out there. I think they're. I've seen interviews with ICP, and they're a big wrestling fan. So I like anyone who's a wrestling fan.
I just get a kick out of it because it's like, of course, we started talking about Juggalo wrestling and everything else. So
I think those guys are great. So I used to have a girlfriend who tried to get me into their music in the late '90s. Not my cup of tea, but they're definitely talented guys, and I really kind of dig them. And some of their stuff they did in wrestling were actually pretty funny. So I remember, I forget which one it was, that they took a power bomb from Mike Awesome on top of the bus and then fell off the bus. when Mike Awesome was doing that '70s guy.
Yes.
Well, bless his heart. I would almost compare John Cena to Derek Jeter. Now, there's a lot of guys out there who love Derek Jeter, and there's a lot of guys who don't like Derek Jeter. Mm-hmm. But no one really says anything bad about him.
Yeah.
He's always been on the straight and narrow as far as we know. He's getting married real soon, which is, he was the world's most eligible bachelor for a very long time, and he did reap the rewards of being that. So,
hey.
Good for you, Derek. Good for you.
That's right.
But even John in himself, like, I may not dig what he's doing in the ring very often. He's done some good stuff, and I was a big fan of him early on too. When he first came out, he had that rapper gimmick at first. I think I really liked it. I did. I did. I'm not gonna lie and say I always hated him. Like I was in the crowd for WrestleMania 20, and I cheered for him against the Big Show. So, but like anything else, much like Hogan, after the amount of years, and technically he's been in the WWF longer than Hulk Hogan was when he was on top. So let's keep that in mind, guys.
Yes.
There hasn't been very much of an evolution for him, unfortunately. And Do I think he should go heel? No, I don't think he's going. No, I don't see it. But can you make him an edgier character? You know, he's very, very white bread, very vanilla, very. I'm going to drink milk, you know, type of guy. And I think if wrestling's going to have this boom period that I predicted, he's going to have to do something a little bit more edgier. Not full out Austin, and we'll go into the. We have a show where I asked the question if Steve Austin destroys the wrestling business, but we'll get into that in a future show. But in terms of these two guys, and we just saw that video. You showed me that video that day of that Cena did. You know, politically he speaks out. You know, and that's Hogan never did that.
Right.
You know, Hogan was very red state '80s Reagan, patriot, love America type of guy, which is fine, and it was fine for the time. But I feel that John Cena has a pulse on what's going on today, and he has opinions, and he just naturally seems like a nice guy. And for him, I think the fact that he was a wrestling fan growing up, that had a lot to do with it as well. Because if you're a fan of wrestling, I'm going to have a little bit more respect for you. Now, there's quite a few guys, not saying now, but in the '80s, who were not fans of wrestling and got in it for the quick buck. Or they didn't want to have real jobs, and or their football career was over, or their basketball career was over, and they're doing this just for the money. Hogan, to an extent, although he claims to be a wrestling fan when he was a kid, but he was in a band. He wanted to be a rock star. He became a rock star, but kind of used wrestling as that platform to become a rock star. So he wasn't bad. I think he did bass, and he wasn't bad, but.
Slap that bass.
Yeah. Between all the allegations of Hogan, I think the sex tape hurts him in terms of like being a role model. I understand that was a bad decision. I think the racist stuff.
That also plays into it too.
That's big, man. That's big. Whether he meant to say it or was he misspoke, he still said it. And I'm not going to kill the guy for it. I don't think he should have lost his job for it. I mean, he could have went to therapy. There's other things you can do. But in the social climate of today, I understand that they'll probably get brought back at some point. I heard they're in talks with him right now to bring him back. So. Oh,
I'm sure they always find their way back at some point. I mean, unless it's Randy Savage and Stephanie.
Yeah.
What? Uh-oh.
I heard that was not true. I heard that Vince was pissed about the Slim Jim thing.
Yeah, that's probably true. But still, good story.
When Savage left, he took the Slim Jim deal with him, and that at a time where Vince didn't have anything, his money was running dry, and the company was going down the tubes, about to go out of business, losing that sponsorship probably really hurt him.
Yeah.
What are you gonna do?
Bone saw's ready.
I just saw that clip the other day. I thought it was fantastic. He looked in great shape too, and that was like 2002. So I think overall, and when we look back 20 years from now, can put John Cena on the Mount Rushmore of professional wrestling? He has your Hogans, your Austins, your Rocks, your Brunos, your Buddy Rogers, Luthez. Does he deserve to be up there?
Well, I think the problem I have with a lot of the wrestlers is that they didn't, like, he didn't evolve.
That's his biggest issue right now.
Yeah, that's the thing. I always wanted to see, and it's not necessarily a heel turn. It's just
No, absolutely not. Evolving for him is another different color T-shirt. Like we're going from orange to purple, and I don't know. It's like he's shilling T-shirts. So it's like he has this thing on Twitter where it was a hashtag beat up John Cena.
Yes, that was pretty good.
But again, he's getting people talk. I think the feud with AJ. I think it's going to help him. I think AJ's going to be able to wring something out of him.
I hope so.
Because Punk did. Punk brought him to another level. You know what I mean? He had more intense promos. His matches were more intense. They're very sharp, very solid. AJ, nipping on his heel, AJ wants to be the number one guy.
Right.
So I think we're going to see one hell of a performance from John Cena going forward. I think he's going to push him. So, we're going to see how that goes. So what do you think Hogan's legacy is going to be?
I think it's for the most part that he was a huge force in the 80s, and then he reinvented himself in the 90s, and then it kind of just petered out. I think his post-wrestling career is going to be looked at as more of a dampening as opposed to after his wrestling, like John Cena, you can kind of already see the writing. Look at The Rock, post WWE career, he's probably going to be in movies.
At some point, he's going to be more known for his movies than for wrestling. Unless you're a big fan of Mr. Nanny, that's not going to happen for the Hulkster, unfortunately.
Right.
But he was so over. I will, and I went back and I watch a lot of wrestling. Full disclosure, guys, pro wrestling in my house is on a 24-hour loop. Between the network and the footage that I own, I have 4 2-terabyte hard drives that are full of footage. And wrestling is constantly in the loop in my house. Mostly it's background noise for the most part. My wife doesn't mind it, so. But I see the reactions that Hogan got, and they're insane. I've never seen that for another wrestler other than Steve Austin. Those pops are huge. People are losing their minds. Now, I understand it was a different time back then. I get it. But you can't deny. Go on YouTube, pop a video. Hogan, 85, 86, 87, 88. And you'll see the impact he had on those crowds. And the amount of money he drew. And he was, at that time, the only wrestler, the first wrestler, only wrestler. He was on the A-Team. That's huge. That's network television. That's a network show. He hosted Saturday Night Live with Mr. T. It's huge. Yeah. Now, there's always been a relationship between NBC and WWF. Don't believe the hype. Because NBC did the Saturday Night's Main Event. Dick Ebersol was very influential early on in the WWF career. Him and Vince are friends. Dick Ebersol's wife did commentary at WrestleMania 2. So I think it was Susan St. James, but don't quote me on that. I'm not 1,000% sure on it. But yeah, yes. Man, it's crazy. Hogan changed the game. Now, I don't think, and I believe this, Cena is not as popular as Hogan was back then. Can we say that? Is that legitimate?
Yes. I think the problem...
It's relative, let's be honest.
Right. So I just think, you have Cena, you have, automatic split in the audience.
Does it hurt John that he's on TV every week? Hogan wasn't on TV every week.
I think somewhat. I think part of the draw of it was that you had a bigger deal when someone was on the TV because it wasn't there you have Cena sometimes when SmackDown years on twice for those and sometimes on recap segments, so it wasn't like a big deal to see Cena oh yeah, Cena's on, of course he is.
But you saw a promo of Hogan on Superstars. The motherfucker didn't even wrestle on the show. And right. Hogan's talking. Awesome. Or Hogan's going to be in a NASCAR costume. I got to be there. I got to see him.
Yeah.
So I think there was more of a sense of urgency of the fans to come see him. So it does put John Cena at a disadvantage, unfortunately, for him. But, Hogan, especially early on in the career, early 80s, he was mainstream, coming off that Rocky movie. And people forget how big Rocky 3 was, and that was a huge movie.
Yep.
And it launched him. It launched Mr. T, too. And Hogan does have friends in Hollywood. He's good friends with Sylvester Stallone, this person, that person, and the other. Yeah. Hulk Hogan was in Gremlins 2.
Was he?
He was. He was in the movie theater. Gremlins 2. He's yelling at Gremlins. He's going to beat him up. But it's some of the other stuff was like Hulk Hogan, was it Iron Sheik that Hulk Hogan was cheap. He would smoke all his weed and wouldn't give him any money for it. Yeah. That kind of stuff. And then the alleged, cocaine abuse. We haven't even talked about the steroids.
Right.
And he lied. He lied on Arsenio Hall telling people that he didn't use steroids, but he clearly did use steroids. And then it was a steroid trial, and that really hurt his legacy as well.
Yeah.
If a lot of the stuff didn't come to light, maybe, we would feel differently about the Hulkster to this day. But, even with the stuff with Bret Hart, there's different opinions on there where WrestleMania 9, the deal with Yoko, winning the belts after Yoko beat Bret, not giving Bret the match. That's what Bret says. I don't know if that's true or not. Hogan says it's not. Bret says it is. What have you. Kind of the creative control clause in his contract. I think really kind of when that came out, because we didn't know that at the time. When that came out, I think that kind of hurt his standing with fans, especially your smart marks or what have you, or your smarks, whatever they want to call themselves. I think that kind of hurt his standings with them. But to be honest, it's no different than Dusty Rhodes. Dusty Rhodes had creative control. No one talks about this. Dusty Rhodes was the booker of Jim Crockett Promotions. He was the top babyface. Clearly, he has creative control there.
Right.
Ric Flair, 89, was the booker. He is the top heel and top babyface of that year.
Yes.
That's creative control. When Flair had the book again in 94, top heel, creative control. So I think this narrative of wrestlers never having creative control of their character, it's a load of shit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Jerry Lawler had creative control in Memphis for 100 years. Every 6 months, because him and Jerry Jaffer would switch off every 6 months. That he owned the territory, but he also had creative control. The Von Erichs, their father owned the promotion.
Right.
You think when Gary Hart was booking them that if Fritz wanted to go over on a 6-man, which he did, that's creative control. So this kind of, I like to debunk false narratives. And I think the fact that they look at creative control as such a negative is strange to me, especially when you have Hogan. So Hogan clearly, along with McMahon, made WWF huge in the 80s. They were successful. One could have done it with the other. You weren't going to put Ricky Steamboat in the Hogan spot and expect that to work. You weren't going to put Paul Orndorff in the Hogan spot and think that was going to work. Maybe Savage. But, if you're going to give creative control, wouldn't it be the biggest star in wrestling history? Would it be the biggest draw in wrestling history? Eric Bischoff, and to his credit, he's like, I didn't know a whole lot about the inner workings of how to be a booker. Right? So why wouldn't you give him creative control?
Right.
Now, it got out of hand to a certain point, and the point where it got out of hand was the Tower of Doom match where Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage beat up 11 guys. They beat 11 guys to win that match. Because it was the entire Dungeon of Doom versus Hulk Hogan. I don't know, it was Dungeon of Doom and Four Horsemen. Let's get that straight. It was the alliance to end Hulkamania. And Savage Hogan beat them all. Did he deserve, my question to you is, did he deserve creative control or not?
See, I think in a case like that, you have... The thing about creative control is that, I get the idea that, you'd have some positive results from it, but you need to have someone in there as a safety gap saying okay, we gotta save this for a certain point,
Right.
And I think that's the problem. When Bischoff was in there, when David Arquette was the world champion, when you had 11 guys losing to 2, and it still happens. A couple of years ago, I remember Triple H beat the world tag champions by himself.
Yeah.
And it's well, you just get rid of the tag champs then. You don't need them.
Is there also a case of bookers being too in love with their top stars?
I say so, but I think one of the problems most bookers have when it comes to their biggest flaw is that they do fall in love with a top star, but they forget that they need to build more.
Agreed.
And that's where the biggest problem is that, when we were talking earlier in the episode about the Monday Night Wars being won essentially with the second-tier talent, if you will.
Yeah.
And it's because they took them and groomed them and made them into what they were. And right now you keep hearing, well, WWE has a depth problem, and there's a lot of guys getting called up, and that's fine. But I think you also have a lot of guys that one of the problems with not having a competitive, a real competitive opponent, if you will, another Monday Night War type opponent, is there's no one for the veterans to go to get fresh again. And there's an article on theringer.com by David Shoemaker, and he's talking about Brock Lesnar being the biggest star in UFC and WWE. And one of the reasons that happened is because, and I agree with this, is that he left WWE, go to UFC. He goes there, then he leaves there, he goes back to WWE, and so he's fresh when he comes back. And he's also not on TV all the time.
Yeah.
When he shows up, it's holy shit, Brock Lesnar's here.
Now, I've made that point. If they ever decide to bring Kurt Angle back, they should use him the same way.
Yeah. And I think they would actually get more mileage out of their veterans that way, what they do with Jericho. Bring him in sporadically, have a short series, whatever. And I think overall as a whole, these guys just work down too much. And their injuries are piling up every year. It's getting worse and worse because they're doing crazier stunts. It used to be well, you save your big move for the big match and the big pay-per-view. And now they're doing those moves on Monday and Tuesdays. So
are you of the opinion that can we come to a place where we can rotate talent in and out. So say like you have 30 guys on a roster for 6 months, plug them back out. You're going to pay them essentially to sit at home. I understand that. But then have another 30 guys to replace them. And then you can bring everyone back for like WrestleMania.
I think
you got to give them an off season. I think that's the biggest issue. You got to give these guys time off.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. And part of it, too, is I think you could have seasons. You know, you could make it more cyclical. But I think, like you were saying earlier, the bookers fall in love with the name. Like, oh, we got to have John Cena on there.
We give John Cena 8 segments.
And the problem is that when you... And they just realize that. But it's like they see it, but they're not doing anything about it. They're like, well, I was reading an article talking about the Shield, and the Shield being like Roman Reigns, Dean Ambrose, and Seth Rollins. None of the 3 getting the ratings they want to get. Well, you spent so much time building John Cena as the only reason to watch. And then when you lose him, you have people going, well, whatever. And that's when you got to build off of that, you know?
You needed your Savage. Now, when Hogan left to film No Holds Barred, they were able to slot Savage in the top spot. And their ratings didn't go down. And the houses didn't go down. And then they would bring in Hogan for snippets every once in a while just to keep his name out there. He would do a run-in or something, but he wasn't there. Technically, he was gone. He was making a movie.
Yeah.
But if they needed him in Tupelo to do a run-in on the Boss Man and save Savage, they would do that.
Yeah.
But you didn't see him. And no one knew he was out making a movie because you couldn't tell because it was WWF. You never saw him anyway. You didn't see him on Primetime. You didn't see him on Superstars.
Right.
They would tape promos. They'd be in the can. He'd be yelling about the Big Boss Man, or they cut something where he's on the Borough Love Show, and that was it. You didn't see a whole lot from him.
Yeah.
But you had Savage to kind of take the spot. Now it didn't work with the Warrior. At least that's what they say. It didn't work. The houses weren't drawn, but I think it was more of the position of the business at the time versus if Ultimate Warrior can draw or not. And anyone that was going to replace Hogan at the top spot for an extended period of time, it wasn't going to work. They weren't ready to let him go. Like in '93, they were ready to let him go.
Yes.
Fans, because they were sick of it. But it's tough. I mean, you still had your Undertaker, you still had your Edges, Randy Orton. Are those guys really suitable number 2 to John Cena? I think CM Punk came the closest.
Yeah, I think
because when you watch CM Punk, he steals the show. He steals the scene. He gets the last word in, and I could watch him every week and not have John Cena on the show, and I think everyone would be fine with that.
You know what happened there?
Yes, just bad. From a business point of view, just from a business point of view, you want to talk about storylines? I'm like, this guy was drawing you money. And for what? You know what I mean? Not that I'm taking sides on this. It doesn't matter to me if Punk may be hard to work with, and that's been documented that he is tough to work with.
Yeah,
Hogan's tough to work with. You know what I mean? Austin, tough. He quit. He walked out. He didn't want to put over Brock Lesnar. He said he didn't want to put him over on Raw. He wanted to wait for pay-per-view. I think that's bullshit. I think he didn't want to put him over. Right. And top guys. Guys protective of their spots are going to be hard to work with. They can't be all John Cena.
No, I think the problem is that when you have that mindset of, well, if I'm the top guy, I get top money and I get this and that, they're afraid to lose it because they don't see like the benefit of like building up the next generation or the next guy. And that's where it always comes back to haunt them because these guys end up getting hurt or they end up, whatever, leaving the business, falling apart physically or, whatever. And it just, they don't see the big picture. It's like you got to keep filling the coffers because these guys go down. And if your storylines are so terrible that no one gives a shit, then you just lose ratings.
I think a lot of these guys have been on the roster for too long. Mark Henry's been on the roster for 20 years. Literally, he came in 96.
Yeah.
And he's been basically there straight through. And when you saw in the 80s was guys a 2 or 3 year run. They're out a year, they come back. And the only time that happens now is when someone gets hurt.
Right. And that's the thing, too. I think, like, you look at Dolph Ziggler. I think if he was in any other promotion and, really given a chance, he could do more. I think he'd be better off leaving and coming back. Like certain guys, like Damon Sandow's off in the independents right now and doing his own thing. Do it, reinvent yourself. And the fans will be happy to have you back because they always pop when somebody comes back, even if it's like a quick pop,
Look, I like to when people talk about this, I like to tell the story of Raven. Now, Raven in his entire career has been a chicken shit heel. He was Scotty the Body, Scott Anthony, Johnny Polo, Scotty Flamingo, basically the same gimmick the entire time. He left the WWF and completely reinvented himself, became Raven, this awesome character, bigger than life. I thought he was fantastic. His work, but who cares? He was awesome. And he was able to parlay that, reinvent himself, and became a bigger star in WCW and then WWE. And I think a lot of guys, he took a chance on himself. Because he was in the WWF, and like, he's your manager, and he claims that he was going to become a backstage producer, agent, that kind of stuff, but he wanted to be a wrestler. So Raven bet on himself. He's like, I'm going to go out and I'm going to reinvent myself. And with the help of DDP and a couple other people, he came out with the Raven, character, and that's fantastic. I do have a place in my heart for Scotty Flamingo, though. One of my favorite matches of all time is Scotty Flamingo versus Johnny B. Bag in a boxing match. And it's DDP and Kevin Nash in the corner as his corner men. They're wearing pink polos. It's ridiculous. And the finish of the match is that Scotty Flamingo is getting beat up. He's getting pounded, what have you. He's in the corner in between rounds. And they put water in his glove. So they take water from the water bottle and put it in his glove. So his glove's super heavy. And he knocks out Johnny B. Bad. But I think they have to do that. They have to spend some time in character development. Like another great example of that is Husky Harris.
Yeah.
Bray Wyatt. Now, how many people when they first saw Bray Wyatt, like, oh, that's fucking Husky Harris from Next, blah blah blah,
right.
Nexus. No one thought that. No, I was like, oh wow, what the hell is this? And now I think he has the potential to be the next great heel if they book him correctly. He could be the next.
Yes.
They haven't yet. So, but he has the potential to be the next Kevin Sullivan, Jake Roberts, Undertaker type guy. They just got to do right by him. But it's unbelievable. Is it a staple of the business? And I hate to use terminology like that. Of the older generation not wanting to give their spots to the younger generation. Does that still go on today?
Sure, I think it's part of it.
Did Lou Thesz not want to, give it to a Bruno Sammartino, which was the next emerging star? Did Bruno not want to give it to Backlund as the next big star in wrestling? Or these guys protective of their spots because as soon as they're not over anymore, there's someone that the people like better than them. They go down on the card and they make less money.
I think the problem they have is they wait too long. Like, you think about it, if you do it right, you have that like epic future versus past type feud, and it lasts longer. So you have it for, let's say, like 3 or 4 years, as opposed to 3 or 4 shows, and then you're out.
Yeah.
Because you planned it right.
It didn't last very long, but a similar case to that was the Hogan Rock match at WrestleMania, which was electric. Now, the match was okay. Perfectly acceptable wrestling. That's what I call it. But the reaction from that was super intense. But they do wait too long, especially with like guys like Sting. Like they brought him in way too late.
Yeah.
You go back to the Invasion, where they didn't bring in, like, as soon as the Invasion was over, they brought in Ric Flair like after the Invasion was done. Great, awesome.
Yeah.
Your Invasion consisted of Shawn Stasiak, which is awesome wrestler, by the way, underrated wrestler, Shawn Stasiak. But you had like Sean O'Hare, who I really like too, but I understand why he didn't work out. Mark Jindrak, he's doing phenomenal stuff now in Mexico now. But you brought in their lower mid carders and you treated them like shit. So when you did the Invasion, it didn't mean anything. You had to switch over Steve Austin and Kurt Angle and put them with WCW and the Alliance, I guess, because they couldn't use the ECW name to kind of get that thing over. And how ridiculous is that? You didn't have your Goldbergs, your Hogans, Nash, Hall, Stings, Luger, Steiner, any of those guys in. So you had DDP and Booker T, though. So I guess that's good. I like Booker T. But Booker T is the guy they pushed. That's like one of the few guys WCW pushed on time.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like he hit his peak at that point, and then they really pushed him. When you say WCW make stars, they made Booker T. That's for damn sure. And they did it like Like if you would have done it in 95 or 95, 96, it wouldn't have worked because he wasn't ready. By the time you're talking about 2000, 2001, he was ready to go. He was polished.
Right.
Was doing the spin-a-rooney, saying sucker, all that, his catchphrases, all that kind of good stuff. So, and his brother, Stevie Ray had slapjack on his trunks, and was people with a slapjack. So I think Booker T was booked on time for his big main event push. I think it's very similar to Benoit in WCW, although it didn't last very long. He departed for the WWF quickly after his title win. But, there's something to be said about guys who sometimes they don't pull the trigger on time. They either go too early or they go too long. Like Austin was on time. They pulled the trigger right when he needed. Imagine them waiting another year.
Yeah.
That wouldn't have worked. Daniel Bryan, they waited too long. And look, he got hurt. They missed out on a year of him being the top draw in WWE because they waited too long.
Right.
I think Cena was right, ready to go. Same thing with The Rock, Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart. I think those guys were timed very, very well. But when you put the belt on a Jack Swagger, a Sheamus, that's right. Way too early. Way too early. And there's nowhere for them to go after that. Do you think they were too early on Roman? You think he needed another year?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think in a way, yeah, because the way the people are nowadays, before he got hurt, that's one thing. But the whole Bautista thing was such a smack, and like people were like, "Screw this."
They were pissed.
Yeah, and I think it really did hurt him overall, the delay. But I never got the whole like turning on him thing, because it's like the guy got hurt, he rehabbed, he came back, and it's like he goes to kind of fulfill his destiny. It's just.
And it's funny because they didn't even give him the belt. He didn't get the belt. You know what I mean? Rollins got the belt. So they waited another year. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, and fans were still treating him like shit. Maybe it was never his time.
Yeah.
Maybe he would have been better as an enforcer role. Being that lead babyface and potentially being the replacement for John Cena, because folks, let's be honest here, John Cena doesn't have a lot of time left.
Right.
Still a young guy, but dude has miles on him. He is wear and tear. So he can be out for, he can come back, have a couple matches, and get injured again and be out for another 6-8 months. You got to start realistically looking at some of these guys. Now, you might have AJ Styles for a while. You got to start looking at Joe, Finn Balor, Seth, Dean Ambrose, and you have to fucking make these guys. You have to make them the right way, and you got to start putting them on the Tonight Show. The stuff that John Cena does, you have to get out. These guys have to be a part of that as well. I know a lot of the sponsors, commercials, they want John Cena, but you have to offer them something different, because when he's done, and it will happen, folks.
Right.
What are you going to do? It took them 5 years to recover from Hogan. More. Like, Bret Hart wasn't really drawing all that big, although he was great. Shawn Michaels wasn't drawing all that great. Wrestling was in a recession. You know what I mean? The United States in the early 90s was also in the recession. That could have been, when there's not any money for, people having a hard time paying their rent, they're not going to wrestling shows. Unless you're a crazy person. I know some crazy people who actually do that. But it took him until Hogan, say his last top run, we'll conservatively say it, or liberally say it, 1992. Austin didn't hit. He was popular, but he didn't hit until 97, 98. So, dude, you're talking 6 years. And your company almost went out of business.
Yeah.
So it's like, have you not learned from that? Looks like they haven't. They had the opportunity with Punk. Punk could have been Cena's macho. You know what I mean? He could have been, because they're always in pairs, right? NWA, right. Dusty and Flair. WWF, Hogan and Macho. Bret and Shawn. Austin and Rock. Cena Orton. Cena Edge and Cena Orton. Now what do you have?
Right.
You have your Rollins, and I think he's a star. But you have to start prepping him. You got to get him ready to do more than this. What's in the ring?
Well, I think what they have to do with this split coming up is use it as an opportunity to sell and build stars. Because I think if you're going to really make it worthwhile, then let's say you have Cena on SmackDown, it's Cena on SmackDown.
Yeah.
And only on SmackDown.
I agree. It has to be a big deal. And it looks like they're splitting pay-per-views. Actually, it looks like they're doubling pay-per-views. So it looks like, because I heard they're trademarked a bunch of names. One of them being Clash of the Champions, by the way.
Yeah.
Hopefully they get to do Halloween Havoc. Because it seems like they've changed a little bit in terms of, okay, we're going to bring in guys over 30. We're going to bring back older stars, veteran stars. They just signed Tajiri. They re-signed him. They brought him back. They might bring back a Brian Kenrick, who I liked. I met him in an elevator once, but he's a really super cool guy.
Yeah.
International talent, which they have not had the best and strongest track record with. A show like NXT, which is the indies done right. You know what I mean?
Yep.
They've made their own alternative. So if you don't like Raw, you don't like SmackDown, there's always NXT for you. For your wrestling fans who like work rate and good matches, and not a ton of storylines there either. They're doing it with not a lot of storylines. So it looks like they changed their method of thinking on a lot of these things. So why couldn't we see them use more WCW properties or AWA properties? Bring back War Games, which I want to see. Bring back Halloween Havoc. They used the Bash for a while. I guess Vince really liked that name. Bring back Starrcade. Imagine if SmackDown's biggest pay-per-view was Starrcade, in December. And they're going towards Starrcade. If they want to split it like that and have separate big shows, like, why can't you make a second WrestleMania?
Yeah.
Is that crazy? Am I crazy? I don't know. I might be a crazy person right now. But make your own competition. If you want to have a show that, what if you had two giant stadium shows like WrestleMania, the other one being Starrcade? You just doubled your revenue. You know what I mean? And I know that's crazy talk. And could they pull that off? It's possible. It's very possible. But they had to get all the talent in, and I feel bad right now for the indies currently, and even like Japan, because they're going to lose a lot of their stars because they're bringing in everybody. I heard they're on aggressive recruitment. So if you're an indie star, you have an indie name, they're looking at you. They're looking at everybody. No restrictions.
One of the problems I think they have is that they had this whole Orlando training center.
They should have multiple ones.
Yeah, and the problem with it has always been that you have the same exact type of guys coming out. I was looking at a roster page once, and it was like the only one who looked different was Husky Harris.
Right.
Like everyone else looked like a cookie cutter. Same old, same old.
I want my 6'8" fat guy. I need my 6'8" fat guy.
Oh yeah, whatever happened? Gammy Bundy, man.
Yeah. I need my cowboys. I mentioned this before. We need more cowboys in wrestling, like real cowboys, like Stan Hansen, guys like Brody, guys like Terry Funk. We need I want to see some more tough guys. You know what I mean? Like everyone is a little too pretty right now. Everyone's in great shape, man. That's good. You guys look all like athletes.
Well, I look. It's funny. I was talking to my friend Scott the other night. We were talking about wrestling, and he was saying, "Oh, you should apply again to be a writer." And I was thinking, well, it would be a good time to apply because they have so much TV now and so much writing need, and you just see some of the stuff comes out. Now, I always hear the stories, and I've read about interviews. People go, "Oh, well, it's McMahon," and that's fine. It's a McMahon show, but it won't always be.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things. If you can carve your name or earn your stripes somewhere, one of the things I thought about was, what they often ask for is a sample of writing, like a sample script. So I've been thinking up ideas for things to do, and I think what happens a lot is you see right now a lot of safe, quote unquote, booking.
Very safe.
There's very little as far as main stage goes, like WWE stuff. Like NXT is a little more open to stuff,
Agreed.
But I also think too is that the Twitter side of things with there's pictures like Seth Rollins. There's a video of Seth Rollins getting a cake thrown at him by Kevin Owens and somebody else.
Would you close that up? Would you shut that down a little bit?
I would tell them.
Would Twitter be kayfabe?
I would say kayfabe a bit, or keep it off, because as a fan, I know when I go to see Star Trek or I go to see Star Wars that Kylo Ren isn't actually giving this guy a sword to the chest. But when you're asking, like, for example, it's like if you watch maybe a better example is this. If I watched basketball, right? Back when the Celtics got good again, they had Kevin Garnett, and he was getting off the bus and getting to the bus and getting chased by one of the players because he made a comment about his wife.
Yeah. That
was like heated, and it led to the thing. It's hard to believe these guys are like really hard ass after each other, and I know it's supposed to be presentation and it's part of a performance, but it's hard to believe it when you have them like on YouTube, joking around. It's one thing that's part of the gimmick, like Kenny Omega and Xavier.
Yeah.
That's one thing, but if you're asking me, like, really buy in, this guy's going to destroy him. I think the problem with Brock Lesnar is he's never had, besides Undertaker, if you want to call it that, a comparable force of nature to fight him. Like he's the irresistible force, whereas he's a movable object.
Right.
It wasn't Cena, and it's not Cena. He's not the type of wrestler.
I mean, you had Angle for a while.
Yeah.
Benoit.
I don't know. I just think they could be doing a lot more, and I think the way to get their attention isn't with same old, same old. It's with...
I'll give you an example. I went to SummerSlam last year.
Yeah.
And I went to the NXT panel. On the panel was, you had Seth Rollins, you had Finn Balor, you had Triple H, you had Sasha, you had Kevin Owens, and you had Corey Graves. Now, say you had... I got a picture with me and all those guys, but how cool would it have been if, like, at the end of the thing, like, Kevin Owens just started talking shit to Finn Balor. Like, I'm going to, it's over, okay, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to kick your ass. Just for the small group of people who were in there.
Right.
To have a pull apart. That would have made that match, and people would have saw it, too, because, WWE don't even put out any videos. Let the fans put out the videos.
Exactly. That's
people got their cell phones out, like, oh, look, Kevin Owens and Finn Balor got in a real backstage fight.
Like, that's the thing that I think they're missing, is that you don't even have to create, quote unquote, the fake atmosphere like they often do.
Right.
Just let people video. Like, I remember years ago we went to a show, Ludwig Borga. He was so stiff. I returned to my friend going, that guy's going to punch him for real. I want to say it wasn't Diesel. It was like in that era.
Right.
And whoever he was, finally...
Was it Luger? It's probably Luger.
I don't know if it was Luger or not, but like he popped him.
Tatanka.
Maybe it was Tatanka. That makes more sense, I think.
Yeah.
But he's like, you can hear them like starting to really slap around things, And I think back now, like if there was the media we have now, what we would see, and I think they're not quite getting it. Like, see, what they're doing, unfortunately, is like they beg for hashtags.
Right.
Well, a hashtag trending right now is, terrible announcer voice, and the missing piece of the puzzle is let the fans, they want to be involved, let them be the courier.
Yeah, they can be a promoter. Like, remember when everyone thought Paige got arrested and how big a news that was because they saw her and the fans had the video cameras out and taking pictures of Paige's interactions with the cop, and she got an ambulance and went with Del Rio to the hospital.
Right.
That's free publicity right there. You don't have to do anything. They didn't even talk about it, and that Twitter blew up. So if you want to have something that feels real, don't have your cameras there. Have a couple of fans there, and have it pull apart and have it be organic, and have it appear on Facebook. Someone's periscoping it on Facebook. Say, oh my God, AJ Styles and John Cena are really having an argument in this restaurant. You know what I mean? Yeah. You can set shit up like that, and you know what? Not for nothing, you can use the fans' footage and put that on your TV 3 weeks from now.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the thing I think they're missing is they're missing that. Remember for a while they were doing the old, go on Twitter and hashtag and we'll make a main event off your vote. And then they started realizing the voting was not going the way they wanted.
Yeah.
And then it was like they figured out, well, we don't even need the vote to really, But people could figure out gee, this is rigged. Don't even open yourself up to that.
Never.
Just do what you want. Get the fan input on stuff you want input on.
Yeah, I fill out my WWE survey every time. I think it's once a quarter they send it to me. Ask me all kinds of questions. So yeah, so that's something that maybe even a TNA should consider them trying to do some, cutting edge stuff with the Final Deletion match, which we'll talk about in a future episode. We'll talk about TNA in general in a future episode, but you can do some this. You can work Twitter, you can work YouTube, and you can work the people if you do it the right way. You don't need to have your camera. Don't have your cameras there. Let the fan be your cameraman, and then you go from there. So awesome. So in terms of John Cena and Hulk Hogan role model, I do believe that John Cena is a better role model for children than Hulk Hogan was in his day. Although John Cena needs to come out with his very own vitamin line, because I had the Hulk Hogan vitamins as a kid. So that was fantastic. John, if you hear this, I sincerely doubt, but maybe you will. Just keep on doing the good work that you do, and I appreciate you as a man. I may not agree with your character, but I understand that you're playing a character and that kind of stuff. And although I may not like that, I appreciate all the stuff you do for military. I appreciate all the stuff that you do for Make-A-Wish kids, and and just making sure people are happy. So I definitely can appreciate that. And Hulkster, you have some work to do, my friend. But I still believe in you. I think you come back. You can come back from all this, and you may not be able to wipe everything away, but I think you can do some things in the future where can you bring you back in the fans' eyes. So that's all I have for this episode. We are running out of time. So for Matt Riley, I am Lex G, and I'll see you next time